Excuse me?
Yes.
What are you doing?
I'm actually in the process of writing a new novel.
Oh, a new novel. I used to write novels.
You did?
Yes.
What?
I was a very famous writer after my death.
After your death?
Oh, I'm Jane Austen. The deceased. I'm her ghost. And,
Wait. Whoa. So you're the ghost of Jane Austen right now, right here.
yes.
Right now.
Yes.
Right here.
Yes.
It's nice to meet you.
Who are you?
I'm Joyce Carol Oates. I'm actually a novelist as well.
Oh, I think I have heard of you recently.
Well, that's nice to know. So, what are you doing here?
Oh, I'm here to see Dr. Josephine.
The psychiatrist. Yeah, I come here
Yes.
once a week too. I have some issues.
I tend to just rant about how I was underappreciated in my time.
Underappreciated. Well, I understand that. I actually began writing in 1963, so, no one really appreciated me except for my grandmother. She actually bought me my first typewriter, and that's how I got started.
My family was very important in helping me get started as well. My sister Cassandra was my biggest supporter. I wrote letters to her for years, but unfortunately after my death, my brother's heir burned all our letters.
That's terrible. I'm so sorry.
Well, he wanted to make sure that my secrets and her secrets were kept secrets.
Well, that's understandable. I guess I understand that.
So what do you usually write about?
Well, I'm pretty big on, tension. It's all about the conflict. And so I read a lot about, rural poverty, sexual abuse, class tensions, desires for power, and especially, like, female childhood and adolescence, and occasionally the supernatural. And I'm hugely big on violence. I love a good violence.
Wow, you
Violence
seem to
novel.
cover it all, don't you?
I do. I just read about things that interest me, and usually it's people. It's just their inner conflicts and what goes on in their mind. And so I read a lot of short stories and lots of novels and things. And actually, if you want to read any of my work, I go by Joyce Carol Oates or Rosamund Smith or Lauren Kelly, because I thought it'd be kind of cool to have a pen name or two.
Pen names are always good. I went by a few pen names myself. They were fun, few between the few that I did, books I did right before I died. I wrote a total of 11 novels before I died, and most of them were published after my death.
Lovely.
My very first one was Sense and Sensibility.
Very interesting.
It was about a family of girls whose their father dies, and their stepbrother is supposed to take care of them, and he kind of throws them to the wayside and doesn't really take care of them, so they're left by themselves. So a main theme of all my books is independence of women and social standards and how they don't really apply to everyday life.
That's so admirable, because really, being a product of the 60s, I'm all about women's rights.
Yes, women were definitely underappreciated and expected to spend most of their time in the home, cooking and cleaning, and unless you had money, you were expected to marry well, and that was the only way you could take care of yourself.
Yeah, I've read about it. I've read a few of your books, and actually, one of my books, Blackwater, I kind of wrote about the Kennedy scandal. It's like Senator Kennedy. There's this girl, Kelly Kelleher, and she and this senator met on this island, and it's all about their struggle after he drives them drunk into this lake and then leaves her to die and actually uses her as a lever to get himself out. It just shows how, and this guy was married too, and so it just shows how, men have little consideration for, women and, their feelings.
That is horrible.
I know.
None of my books were ever quite that involved. My favorite one, I think, that I wrote that many readers enjoy today is Pride and Prejudice.
I've read that.
About Elizabeth Bennet and all his sisters and Mr. Darcy and
Of course.
how he came to the neighborhood and everyone thought he was so uppity and proud when in fact he was a very loving gentleman, took care of his younger sister.
Wow.
After the death of his father and
Yeah,
saved her from total social ruin from George Wickham.
That sounds like a lot of class tension, which I totally relate to. And my most probably acclaimed book is actually a book of short stories, but the one I've seen as my favorite is Blonde, and I wrote it about Marilyn Monroe. I don't know if you've ever heard of her.
I have heard of Marilyn Monroe.
Yes, so she's a figure in today's world that's vastly misunderstood, and so being so interested in female adolescence and just the female mind in general, especially at a young age. I just began with her birth and ended with her death, and just covered everything basically. And I'm just really interested in characters. That's like setting, kind of on the wayside, but it's mostly the conflict between the characters and their internal mind process. I find that really interesting.
That is quite interesting. I will have to go and see if I can find one of your books to read. Yes. Find someone to turn the pages for me. Because I'm a ghost.
Yes, you are.
But as I take a lot of pride in the characterization of my characters, and I make sure that the reader can clearly understand them. But I do set a lot of store in the setting, and my favourite places are usually the garden. All of my books involve intense talks, intense parts of my book occurring outside in walks. Many people get proposed to in the gardens, or find out the truth about someone while walking.
How romantic.
I know. I'm big on the romance. But I'm more of a realistic writer, and I didn't really fall into the realism of the Victorian age, and so I was just kind of left alone until someone realized my true genius.
That's lovely.
My family was very supportive. My parents were the first people to ever read my book, and it was Lady Susan, which was the first one I wrote, but it was the last one published. It was told through a series of letters.
Oh.
And so...
That's very interesting.
Very different for the time period. But...
and you really, started off for all of us, especially women writers. Like, I owe a lot to you.
I'm glad I have a few admirers. But I also comment a lot on social standards. I can't stand them. Yeah. Women need to be independent. What sort of family life do you have? Are you married?
Family? Yes, I am married. And I'm a professor at Princeton. And so my husband is also very intellectual, and he writes as well. And so often, we sit and talk about books over meals, and I'll read a book, and then he'll read it too, and we'll discuss that together. But my youngest sister is very autistic, and I have a brother, Fred Jr., who's named after my father. And I have a pretty good family life. It's very solid. But I was closest to my grandmother, who died when I was young. But like I said before, she gave me my first typewriter, and she gave me my first book that I really loved, Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. And that seriously affected my life in so many ways. And I owe most of my writing to her. But I really started writing... at 14, but seriously I started writing at Syracuse University, and I was actually the first in my family to even finish high school, and the first to go to college, too. And so I started writing in creative writing there, and that I basically just took off from there, and I was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize, and I got lots of National Book Awards. So, I can't really relate to you not being recognized in your time, Eric, because right now, women are much more respected, especially as novelists and writers. And so it's a lot easier for me to, achieve renown, unlike you, when, you were in an era with such, repression for, feminism.
Well, being born in 1775, I started writing around the age of 14, and my parents...
Me too, 14.
I know, it's just that time. And I had a little schooling. My father sent me off to school with my sister in London, but I loved living in the countryside, and I was number 7 of 8 children.
Wow.
And my sister Cassandra and I were close friends throughout our entire childhood. And I never married. On holiday one time I fell in love with a young man who died, sadly. And I was devastated for years.
My first husband died, actually, of complications with pneumonia. But I mean, I've gotten over it. But he was such a great man.
I'm very sorry to hear that. I actually did accept a proposal from a man named Harris Big Wither, who was the brother.
Excuse me, his name was Harris Big Wither.
Yes, I know.
I'm going to use him as a character in one of my stories, but anyways, continue.
He was the brother of some of my closest friends, and one night I accepted his offer of marriage, and the next morning I was so devastated over it that I locked myself out of the engagement.
Gosh.
And I was devastated for months, and...
That'll take the religion right out of you. And actually, I was raised Catholic, but now I'm a severe atheist, and there's no
Well, that is something, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, I would. Is Dr. Josephine even here
I
today?
don't even know.
Normally she would be out here by now. What time is your appointment?
It's actually in about 5 minutes. So.
Oh, mine was about 20 minutes ago. Well, this
This has been a lovely experience.
Yes. So, how old are you right now?
I'm 73.
Oh, really?
I know I look kind of young.
Well, if you go by the age that I am, actually, I would be 236. But I died when I was 41, and there's many different ideas about how I died. Some say Addison's disease. Some others believe I just had some advanced form of pneumonia, but because and the only reason they know this is because of the doctor's notes. But there's little known about my life other than just where I grew up, and my father died when I was young, and I had to move around. And once I left the countryside, I was very upset because I love the country. Most of my stories take place in the country. But
as do I. Rural poverty is a big thing with me, and I grew up in New York.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And basically, I'll write about any setting. Really, my stories, especially my short stories, they take on so many different settings. Everywhere, basically, I'm a huge runner as well, and I think of a lot of my plots to my stories as I'm running, and so, I mean, I've traveled a lot, and I've experienced a lot, so that has contributed a lot to my writing.
What, are any of your characters sort of don't fit into society, or they're told they can't do something?
Well, just like I said before, I'm big on the internal struggles. But most of my characters, I really favor a winning and hardy survivor. I don't really appreciate the weak character who as committing suicide at the end or something. I'm a big push for the survivor, and I mean a lot of my characters are very thoughtful, and they think a lot, and that's basically a lot of my writing. And so many of them, yes, are a bit of an outcast in society. I mean,
it sounds very much like my character Anne from Persuasion. As a young girl, she fell in love with a sea captain, but her mother's best friend. Her mother died when she was younger, and her mother very much favored her because she was the younger sister. Her older sister is very spoiled, and her younger sister also very spoiled, married young, went and had children, has to have people take care of her. But Anne fell in love with the sea captain and was told by her mother's best friend that she shouldn't be marrying. She'd be marrying down in society. And at that time, he was just a lowly sailor. But as the story goes on, she receives offers of marriage, and she just refuses them. And she's about the age of 30, and she's basically an old maid. And all of a sudden, in comes her Captain Wentworth.
Oh my
lowly
goodness.
Sailor to sea captain of the Royal Navy. And they're at first they're not sure that they still have the feelings for each other that they did. And then at the very end, he asks for her hand in marriage again, and she's dissuaded by everyone. But this time, she chooses to follow her own heart.
That's lovely.
It's a very happy ending. But unfortunately, unlike my own life, all my characters ended up married and happy with men they love, and mine died.
Well,
it's quite a sad story. So, but
I can understand that. Well, one of my most interesting characters was probably Marilyn Monroe, as I was telling you before, and because she's just such a complicated and interesting person. And she, married lots of people like Joe DiMaggio, authors, playwrights. She had a menage a trois with Charlie Chaplin's, son, Cass Chaplin, and she's had a very wild life. And she was so sheltered as a child, and then really came to know about the world and kind of had it thrust at her. And she was obviously a young actress and model, and she didn't really know how to deal with it. And so a lot of people took advantage of her. But I really admire her strength and just. Her, she's just such an icon. Marilyn Monroe is just such an icon, and she really set a standard for women in the film industry and in the modeling industry and just in daily life, because she's just such a unique person. And she was a writer herself, and she would often keep a notebook just like this, and she had many miscarriages and abortions, and she just was a very complicated and troubled person. And so I guess I can relate to, your troubled characters as well.
No, she sounds like such an interesting person. It's very sad that I missed out on all these very, very interesting people. But I'm very glad to have met you.
Oh, as am I.
It was very nice to meet you.
You as well.